Hi, thanks for joining me and talking about our case study today, which is of Jane, a 14-year-old patient who presents to us with a referral from her primary care provider for obesity. She has, her provider has noted an annual weight gain of 10 to 15 pounds since she is 8 years old, which has now pushed her over into the category of obesity. Her case is interesting as it illustrates many of the common precursors to obesity diagnosis. Her family has a parent with obesity, in fact, both of them. They have food insecurity. She does have mobility. She is also an ethnic minority, and she does have a familial predisposition to obesity, and her parent and her family does consume an elevated amount of fast foods. Now, familial predisposition does exist. However, it is important to note that it is the actual foods consumed, the calories in, calories out from physical activity, that actually does determine whether obesity is present or not. We're going to look at the assessment of the anthropometrics, biomarkers for disease, and intake comparisons of her recall. She is 69.5 kilograms, 5'2", with a BMI of 28. However, when you plot these on the CDC growth chart, it puts her into the 96th percentile for her BMI for age, and adolescent obesity is defined as exceeding the 95th percentile. The CDC growth charts do account for the appropriate adolescent weight growth at this stage, so this is an escalation above that weight growth, so it is not just part of the normal trajectory. Her medical history is fairly unremarkable: an ulnar fracture at 4 and seasonal allergies, but her parental medical history, her father has obesity and type 2 diabetes, whereas her mother has obesity and hyperlipidemia. So she does have these familial risk factors into her profile as well. She lives in a fairly typical American household with both of her parents at home and 2 other siblings. However, she also has a very typical eating environment, unfortunately. Breakfast may or may not be eaten. Often it is not. Lunch is often in the school cafeteria. Dinner is primarily fast food. The family chooses this for time concerns and budgetary reasons, and food insecurity is unfortunately a very real problem in their lives. Their father has intermittent employment opportunities, and providing appropriate food is very difficult to accomplish in their family. Based on her 3-day recall, evaluating it showed some concerns that have contributed to where she is at metabolically at this point. She is consuming about 3,000 calories a day, which her energy needs are more appropriate at 2,368 calories a day. So she's getting an excess of almost 700 calories a day. Carbohydrate and protein are okay, but her fat intake is significantly excessive, by about 17% higher than we'd like to see it, and the saturated fat on top of that is also about 7% higher than the recommendation. Her fiber intake is low at 18 compared to 26 minimum. Her vitamin D and calcium are insufficient, which will contribute to bone considerations we'll look at in a minute, and her sodium is very excessive, almost more than double the recommendation, and her added sugars are at 9%, almost double the added sugar content that she should be having in her diet. And you can see this reflected in her labs. Her fasting glucose was elevated, putting her at a state of insulin resistance or prediabetes. Her HDL is low, which is prohibiting her from having the cardioprotective lipid values, and she has a risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer from not having this appropriate HDL level. Similar risk from having the elevated LDL level. The triglycerides, likely from her high fat content, are contributing to hyperlipidemia and increase her risk of atherosclerosis and cardiovascular disease. Her elevated blood pressure is puts her at a pre-hypertensive state, which is very concerning and likely attributable to her extremely excessive sodium intake from the fast foods. When you compare her food group intake to the MyPlate recommendations and DGA recommendations for her age, even though she's consuming almost 700 extra calories a day, she's deficient in every food group. So her excessive caloric intake with limited physical activity gives her the risk of obesity. The high fat and saturated fat are largely from her fast food and processed food consumption, which give her the risk of the CVD and cancers like we discussed. She's not getting enough dietary fiber and micronutrients, putting her at risk at many other diseases. Her food behavior is concerning. She's eating fast food greater than 3 times a week, which is associated with the high calorie and low micronutrient intake, and skipping breakfast can compromise a child's growth and development. And all of these are very real concerns that we're having for Jane. She has inadequate dairy consumption, which puts her at risk for missing that peak bone mass metric and osteoporosis later in life. She also has added sugars, which gives her the elevated blood glucose and risk of early onset diabetes. Well, no, onset is appropriate, but of her having diabetes at a quite young age. So let's look at the appropriate interventions and goals for her situation. The Academy recommends that obesity treatments include addressing not only diet, but also exercise, psychological factors, and environmental concerns. And we're going to see all of these in these interventions. Of utmost importance is including the family. Research has shown that the greatest improvement in adolescent BMI occurs when parental involvement and changes at home occur with the intervention. So you're going to see those in action in these interventions. First, we're going to engage the social support of the family. Although Jane is growing in independence and making her choices out of the home more than ever, her family is still a primary influencer in her dietary choices. They do this by being the role models, the gatekeepers of healthy and accessible, easily taken in foods, and they are also the teachers of cooking skills that she's going to need for later in life. Eating meals as a family has been shown to improve the quality of adolescent intake, and a greater reduction in adolescent BMI was found by involving the family unit and having Jane, the adolescent, involved in meal planning, cooking, and inclusion of screen-free meal times. Enjoying breakfast, having all those meals accounted for, is also advised for hyperlipidemia. So the goals to accomplish that is to make a family meal plan, to educate the family on the importance of 3 balanced meals a day and up to 2 snacks a day. And these need to be eaten at home instead of out. And we're going to work on her on how to do this. We want them eating out less than 2 times a week and to aim for 6 screen-free meals a week. Secondly, we're going to implement nutritional counseling one-on-one with Jane using the motivational interviewing technique. This is so that adolescents do prefer to be treated as individuals, and their goals need to be tangible, immediate, and based on real-life concerns. So using motivational interviewing is an appropriate technique in order to elicit what these specifically are to Jane. So then we're going to implement, as we use those techniques to identify her 1 to 3 personal goals. For herself, I may want to see her blood pressure lower, but how does that reflected into Jane's mentality? So we're going to do that. We're also going to get her a journal and get her to start just spending 5 minutes a day reflecting on what worked and didn't work and her trying to reach those goals. We're going to have her craft up a little vision board of those goals so that she has a daily reminder of what she's doing and why. And then we're going to work on the household as a whole with a balanced diet. The appropriate portions and balanced food groups are necessary for caloric intake and macro and micronutrient appropriate distribution. So we also need to work with them on identifying the major sources of sodium, fat, and added sugar in their previous diet so that they can know what to avoid when making independent food choices at home. So our goal is going to be to work with the family to create a balanced diet of appropriate portions to create weight loss. And for Jane in particular, we are going to give the boundaries of consuming less than 2,300 milligrams of sodium a day and less than 59 grams of added sugar. So instead of having her count calories, we're going to work on food groups, on proportions within that, which should naturally provide a good balance of caloric intake, but we do want her to track the numbers of sodium and added sugar, because those will directly affect her diagnoses. In order to improve her general health and increase the caloric balance appropriately, we're going to include the entire family in regular exercise. The recommendation for Jane is to get 60 minutes a day of moderate to vigorous physical activity with 3 days a week of each aerobic, muscle, and bone strengthening exercises. In addition to adding in a whole meal plan, this is going to be a lot more organizing to do. Initially, we're just going to start with getting them to address adding in 60 minutes a day of moderate to vigorous exercise of any preferred modality. However, down the road, we would like to bridge it into these different groups to ensure that we're growing her at her best capacity. Ideally, this exercise would be done outdoors, and that is because her diet is going to be insufficient in vitamin D, most likely, and so that would help facilitate that intake. If she's unable to, we will need to add in vitamin D supplementation of 600 international units a day. Now, most importantly is to connect the family with nutrition services that are appropriate for them. Although the local options may be available as well, the federally offered SNAP program can help address food insecurity. In fact, it is important to note that households with food insecurity are 22% more likely to suffer with obesity. It is really important that we address this in order to be able to accomplish any of the previous interventions successfully. The goal of this is going to be the first goal to tackle and make sure happens, and so we want this accomplished within 2 weeks of the initial encounter. A 3-day meal plan to address her nutritional concerns was based on providing the appropriate nutrient intake, cost effectiveness, and the general palate of a young adolescent. So for breakfast day 1, we're looking at a Greek yogurt parfait. We're adding in some protein, and she's always liked juice for breakfast, so we're just going to do a fortified version to help with some of our nutrients and also keep some familiarity in her day. For a little morning snack, we're going to do some ants on a log with celery, peanut butter, and raisins. Lunch, where you'll see I use the whole wheat mini bagels a couple times. This offers a easy, familiar source of whole grains and is portion controlled, being the mini size. So we're going to make some pizza bagels for lunch, and we're going to try to flavor up the water with some lemon to get her used to a different type of flavored beverage that is closer to just plain water. Afternoon snack, cinnamon honey popcorn, some air pop popcorn with cinnamon honey, surprisingly delicious and filling. Dinner, she likes a chicken sandwich patty, so instead we're going to do a grilled chicken sandwich on a bun, a whole wheat bun, avocado, mustard, spinach, tomato, and then a side salad that we're going to be intentional to do a low sodium dressing and get her some fortified skim milk to give her low saturated fat while getting her the appropriate nutrients, especially calcium for those growing bones she's got. For day 2 for breakfast, we're going to do just a nice bowl of Special K with red berries, a fortified cereal with some fortified milk and orange juice. For the afternoon morning snack, we're going to do some hard-boiled eggs that I affectionately call Kraken eggs or dragon eggs, also fun, and some low-sodium Triscuit crackers. And the intention in this menu plan is to modify familiar foods to an adolescent in order to make them palatable but also nutrient dense. So the lunch of quesadillas and carrots are going to be some whole wheat tortillas with low sodium refried black beans, low fat cheese, carrots, and some lemon. An afternoon snack, we're going to call it banana nut no bread. So instead of banana bread, it's just bananas and walnuts, making it kind of fun and playful. For dinner, we're going to do a nice ground turkey spaghetti with plenty of whole wheat, appropriate portion of whole wheat noodles, but a lot of ground turkey in it to make it satisfying, and some seasoned broccoli with a low sodium seasoning. For day 3 for breakfast, we're going to do hard-boiled eggs with those mini bagels again, some cream cheese and orange juice, yogurt parfait for a snack, a lunch with peanut butter and jelly, and a big platter of veggies with some hummus. Get her used to incorporating that fiber and nutrients into her day. An afternoon snack of the popcorn. And for dinner, we're going to do the familiar burger, but we're going to make it a lettuce wrap, and we're going to add some potato wedges in there for fillingness and some comfort. And when we look at this nutrients and how they stack up to what she had had previously, we're hitting the goals on everything except for vitamin D. She's probably going to feel more satisfied with these